Hey folks, welcome back to DCS. Please bear with me because I'm recovering from a cold and I really wanted to get this video done sooner rather than later. So today, you join me in the shiny new MiG-29 Fulcrum in glorious full fidelity, and I'm going to be highlighting to you the highs and lows of current ownership. Bear in mind that this module is considered early access, meaning that mainly I'm an impatient sucker who couldn't wait for it all to work properly, but probably more importantly that we shouldn't expect it to all work properly. If you're new here, my content style is generally to present you with a sortie and then talk you through things as they happen. I'm going to show off that format for this video because there's just too much to cover without a script, but it will be back for my future coverage of this module. Below I've added timestamps so you can get an idea of the contents. Feel free to skip to the parts that are most important to you. Let's start with first impressions. Getting stuck right in. Visually this thing is absolutely beautiful. For me personally, the Fulcrum has always been a contender for the sexiest fighter jet of all time. It's kind of on par with the Viper and the Mirage 2000 for me, with the flanker sort of sitting in the background with a sad look on its face. I can never really pick a true top spot, but the Fulcrum is extremely close. Eagle Dynamics have really knocked the visual model out of the park, both in and outside the jet, including a nice selection of liveries as well. Notable highlights in the visual modelling are the vapour effects, which I think have taken a step up lately. We have the remodelled F5 as the most recent example, but going back a bit, the Hornet and Viper are our main comparisons here, given that they're also from Eagle Dynamics as well. The reigning vape champion is the Phantom, by a country mile, but I do like what they've done with them here on the Fulcrum. They've also modelled some airflow disturbance causing flutter across the intake vents, which I think looks absolutely epic, and both that and the vapour effect serve to really separate it visually from the lower fidelity Flaming Cliffs style Fulcrum that we already had in the game. On the downsides, they don't seem to have modelled any wing flex in the full fidelity MiG, which is a little bit disheartening given that the lower fidelity one does have that feature. I am probably extremely naive when it comes to these things, but you'd think that if it's been done already on a different model, they could have just sort of ported it over. I'm not a developer, so the fact that they haven't done that is probably telling. But it's sad to see it absent nonetheless. Let's assume it's coming later. Early access and all that. Moving on to another upside of the modelling, and something new for the sim in general, I think. And I do have to thank fellow sim enjoyer Command T for pointing this one out, and I'm very sorry to be the first to mention it if you haven't managed to get your video out on it yet by the time this one is published. But we have some tyre physics and deformation now, which I think is pretty cool. Check out that bulge. I actually highly recommend checking out Command T if you aren't already aware of his channel. He is a pilot by profession and as a hobbyist, as well as a simmer, and offers some excellent insights that tie all three things together, using DCS as a medium to do so. One of my favourite channels to watch. So will you ever see this tyre stuff from the cockpit? No. But is it cool as fuck? Yes. It's one of those things that is like so normal in day-to-day life that you wouldn't ever dwell on it or think about it, but that really highlights how big a deal it is for a game developer to put the effort in to model something like this. The most prominent other example I can think of that makes me feel the same way, when I first got my PlayStation 3, which must have been, I even know, absolutely years ago, we're talking like pre-2010 I think.
You're old.
But the first Uncharted game had a portion in an early level where you had to like wade through some water, and the waterline on your clothing, you only appeared to be wet where you had gone in the water. Like there was a clear line on the body of the character where the water had come up to.
I'm really wet.
You're probably sat there thinking, well yeah, that's what water does. But that was absolutely mind-blowing back then that a developer cared enough to put that much attention to detail in, and I feel the same way right now about the tyres on the Fulcrum. Anyway, so first impressions are very, very good, and it's about to get better for a small minority of us. My process for learning a new module generally involves hopping into a free flight to map the axis controls, and then to just get a bit of a general feel for it. But now that I have force feedback, it adds another layer of depth to new modules, and it's such a crucial part of my experience now that if it isn't done well, it could severely hamper my enjoyment of a module, perhaps preventing me from flying it at all if it's done poorly. I haven't been able to play War Thunder at all since getting force feedback, for example, because it just isn't supported, and I can't bear to fly without it. Anyway, the Fulcrum's force feedback is exceptionally good. It has the usual faster equals stiffer and slower equals slacker that you'd expect, but it also has force trim. So adjusting the trim moves the rest position of my stick in real life just as it does in the jet. They've also modelled the pitch kicker, which is a feature on the real thing which prevents the pilot from pulling too hard and causing flight departure. Now I can pull harder than the Moza AB9 can resist. So I can pull through and ignore the pitch kicker, but I can feel it with such a tactile generosity that I know exactly when to stop pulling, and it makes it absolutely effortless to cut through a rate fight in this thing. I'm not sure what the ideal rate speed is, but I can definitely feel if I'm overdoing it. It also shakes violently if I slow and pull through airframe buffeting, as well as having the usual haptics for weapon launchers, jettisoning stalls, lowering the flaps on the gear, firing the gun, rolling resistance on the runway, the afterburner kicking in, basically everything. Oh, like when you pop flares and countermeasures, you can feel that as well. It spoils the user with its force feedback implementation. It's easily on par with the likes of the Phantom and the Mirage F1, which are my two other favourites to fly since getting force feedback. There is, however, one minor downside of the force feedback implementation, which may be fixed later, but I just wanted to highlight it because it nearly made me crash on my first takeoff. During the startup, there's a flight control bit test that you go through, where the jet cycles some stick movements. Whilst this is happening, my force feedback stick mirrors the movements the stick in-game is going through, which is very cool. However, if you interrupt this process, it can mess up your trim. Here's where it relates to force feedback. So I didn't actually touch my stick at all, but my trim ended up being completely balked after the test finished running anyway. Now I think that this is because force feedback sticks, when they're not under any airflow pressure, they just kind of flop. So the stick for me kind of naturally rests in a slightly forwards position, and I think that the game must read that natural resting weight of the stick as human input pressure, rather than just gravity. With a spring-loaded stick, that wouldn't be a problem, but for me with the Moza, it means that I have to manually hit the trim reset button before taxiing, otherwise I might be unwittingly trying to induce a rolling or pitching manoeuvre mid-takeoff without realising it. Just be sure to check that the neutral trim lights are illuminated before you start rolling. Another thing that I really miss, all of the modules have a stick overlay feature, which you activate with right control and enter, which is really handy for showing any desync between your real-world joystick input and the game's joystick position, but that overlay hasn't been added yet for the Fulcrum. If it had, it'd be much easier for me to demonstrate the trim issue and the pitch kicker. Hopefully it'll be added with the next patch. Okay, moving on from first impressions and force feedback, my next step on the learning ladder is the startup procedure. There are already a vast swathe of video tutorials on this, so I'm not going to get into it here, but one thing I noticed immediately after learning it offline is that when you then hop online, large important aspects of it do not currently work. And I want you to hold on to the idea that offline versus online can have different results, because it relays back to the radar, which we'll get to in a bit. So what doesn't work about the startup? There's two things. One is the compass, which is obviously quite important for bra calls and general navigation, and the other is INS, which is important for using the navigation system. During startup, one of the very first things that you do is wait for the gyros to spin up before you magnetically slave your compass. This step is supposed to align your compass with your actual bearing, but online, currently, it doesn't do anything. Your compass just stays static in its default position. Sometimes you can turn the main gyro off and change the nav system to use the backup gyro, which can sometimes fix the compass, but I've had an equal number of times where that doesn't work either, and there's currently no workaround for fixing the INS. So if you fly online and like to navigate legitimately, you currently can't. Moving on, thankfully the contention server allows you to hot start the jet, so that's what I and basically everyone else has been doing. After learning the basics offline, I like to cut my teeth on the job, as it were, and just muddle through as I go, but I've challenged myself to only fly the MiG-29 in multiplayer using VR, and I'm so glad that I made that decision. Before we get into why, I just want to remind you all that Pimax VR have an upgrade event running until the end of the year. If you have an existing VR headset and show them proof of purchase, they will actually offer you a discount of up to $100 off their Crystal Light, or some extra freebies for a Crystal Super. including prescription lenses worth upwards of $150. If you want to take advantage of this, then check the link in the description, and don't forget to select YouTube and my channel when asked where you heard about it. It's how you'll receive your discount code to apply at checkout. Back to the Fulcrum. The VR implementation is absolutely sublime in this thing. The helmet mount sight and the sun visor are earth-shatteringly more legit to look at and through in VR, and it genuinely upsets me that I can't show you the full effect through a 2D monitor on YouTube. In flat screen, the visor is really just a colour filter, and the helmet mount sight is like a blurry stick. It's very uninspired. But in VR, there is a genuine sensation of a glass screen coming down in front of your eyes. You can actually see the sunlight coming in from behind you and reflecting off the inside of the glass visor. It makes it feel as though my VR headset actually is the helmet and that I'm lowering a sun shield over my actual eyes. It is astoundingly convincing. Then there's the helmet mount sight eyepiece. So this thing is rendered in high definition, but only over your right eye, and it's positioned such that you can focus on it to soak in all the details because it's obviously there in high def, but you can also look through it. What that does is generate a very similar effect to how it looks in its blurry stick configuration in 2D. So they've managed to basically model it in VR so well that you can use it exactly how you'd use the real thing. If you close your right eye, then you can actually see a small piece of it in your left eye's periphery as well, or at least you can in the Pimax Super because of the field of view. But it is mind-blowingly immersive, being able to close either eye and still see elements of the same thing that's near. It's hard to explain, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. It's just cool as fuck. You can also always see the little box housing at the top of your peripheral vision at all times, which really sells the impression that you aren't wearing a VR set, you're actually wearing a flight helmet and sitting in a MiG-29. I'm also really happy that they've made the pilot model actually move to utilise these features rather than using telekinesis, and I'm happier still that you can even see it done from outside the jet. There was a point, I don't think I'll have managed to capture it, but I was sat next to another MiG on the runway, and I looked over to him, and as I did so, he closed his visor down before he took off, and little things like that just add so much to this game. Anyone who's been following the channel for a while will know that because I've spent so long flying in flat screen, I've actually been really struggling to transition to VR because of the difference in feel, and not being able to perform as well because of the change. But this is so outstandingly in-your-face immersive in VR that I don't actually want to fly it in flat screen. The way these helmet features work on a monitor, it doesn't do anything for me, it's just meh. But in VR, it's like an actual feature of the jet. It adds so much. The last thing to talk about in this video is the radar/avionics of the Fulcrum. We all probably know what the low fidelity Fulcrum is capable of at this point because it's been in the game for forever. And I think that the informed among us will have been expecting the full fidelity version to have worse performance across the board, especially with the radar, and not just because of the added complexity of manipulating its controls, but also in raw performance, so target detection range, ability to hold locks, etc, etc. Let me tell you, it is worse than you could have imagined. The Fulcrum is touted as a 4th generation fighter, but in essence it was the first 4th generation fighter. It's probably better described as a Gen 3.5, but even that feels quite generous, honestly. Think of it as Gen 4 performance, because at the merge, this thing can tango with even the most modern airframes in the game, but its avionics suite is arguably worse than that of the Phantom. And if you were around when the Phantom launched, then you'll know how difficult it was to get the radar to work. I think it took me 2 weeks to actually kill anything with the Sparrows. The Fulcrum's radar is very fiddly, gives you very little information, locks can be broken extremely easily, and it's hard to tell whether I'm missing a trick in the manipulation of it, or whether it's just bad. Now with the Phantom, all of the same things were true, but the manipulation of it was done by another person, an AI, so it was very easy for us all to just say that the AI wasn't very good. But in the Fulcrum, I don't know if the radar is not very good, or if I'm not very good at using it, But earlier, if you remember, I mentioned the differing performance between offline and online, and one of the things that makes this even harder to gauge is that when you're doing the instant action missions offline, or if you make your own mission offline, the radar seems to be far more reliable than it does online. And I don't know if that's because the AI behave differently to being locked, or if it's because offline I can use external camera angles and the F10 map to know where the target I'm trying to lock actually is to help me better cross-reference everything. But whatever the reason is, the radar does not feel as good when you're online. And when you're online, you're not fighting AI, you're fighting actual people. So the tension really compounds the difficulty of maintaining good awareness. Fighting with this thing just feels like fighting the radar, basically. You're constantly having to change settings. It's almost grounds for having a backseater. It's absolutely relentless. It's probably also worth mentioning, before I forget, that the IFF system is currently non-functional. So in multiplayer it's important to cross-reference your locks with a GCI or the EWR reports before engaging, which ups the stress levels even higher. I've already been a victim to team killing at least once. I do have a tip for you when it comes to trying to lock something though. You really do have to hold the lock button for a long time, sometimes for as long as 8 seconds, which feels like absolute eternity with the closure rate of these jets. But think of it like the radar dome has to slew to point at your target before it can lock it. That mental visualization helped me pace things better and sort of temper my expectations. In conclusion, despite its many pros, if you're a gamer first and a simmer second, you would be wise to consider that the poor standard of avionics leave the Fulcrum in quite an awkward position in DCS. Its capabilities in a fight against air and ground are significantly weaker than other Gen 4 airframes in the game, meaning that you will severely struggle even in a Fox 1 or semi-active radar homing environment, which should be where you see the most parity with opposition, but the airframe's performance would utterly trounce anything older in a manoeuvring dogfight. So it's both too modern and too powerful for a Cold War server, but its avionics are too old and decrepit to be competent in an 80s server, like Contention. It's kind of without a true home. You're either overpowered as hell, or you'll really struggle. It's a true Soviet struggle bus. But a while ago, I did a video with Maguire when we both flew the F5 on Contention 80s, and I've actually done a few videos when I've flown the F5 on 80s, and it's a massive uphill battle, but it's so intensely rewarding when you do well, because you know that you're the underdog, and that is exactly what the Fulcrum is. So if you want a challenge and you want to feel like absolute hot shit when you do well, then the Fulcrum is the jet for you. But if you want an easy ride, run away. Go the other way, pick something else, maybe stick to the FC3 version. So future videos will be gameplay orientated and better highlight the difficulty of managing the systems, so if you want to see me putting it through its paces, or perhaps more aptly, it putting me through mine, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below to help fight the algorithm and I'll get back to you. Hit the like button, or even the new hype button. I don't even know what that is yet really, but if it's down there, let's give it a go. I think it's to help push the video so that others find it. Don't forget about Pimax's upgrade event, linked in the description. I'd also hugely appreciate you checking out the other links for VR Rock if you're interested in some VR prescription lens inserts, air models if you're looking to spruce up your office or gaming space, the channel's membership scheme if you've enjoyed what you've seen today and want to show your support, or the thanks icon below to make a one-off donation for my vodka fund, because I'm gonna need it if I'm flying this thing. Thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.